My name is Viren Swami. I'm Professor of Social Psychology at Anglia-Ruskin University, and you're listening to the Brutally Delicious podcast.
I'm pretty excited about this guy. I read his paper.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I was curious to find out, though, like how he really saw the... Because in the paper it says, heavy metal is a more male-dominated kind of genre.
Right.
Now, I don't know how he came to that conclusion, really.
I don't know. I mean, but I don't think it's wrong if you go to a show. It's, kind of a sausage fest. Most shows, right?
Yeah, that's a true story. Yeah, yeah. You're usually making breakfast with the sausage. It's true,
right? But yeah, I don't know how he came to this conclusion. But the paper is great. I mean, I've read it again this morning before we started, and I kind of identify. I can't wait to find out where you fit in, being the new metalhead.
Yeah, yeah.
How it all relates to you, because I grew up with this shit. So.
Yeah, well, I grew up with hair metal, but I don't really think it's like. I don't think that really counts as a metal fan per se. Like,
no, I disagree. I think it does. I think there's probably a lot of people listening that won't agree, but I definitely think it's hair metal and not hair rock. It was definitely.
I remember the first time I heard "Kill 'Em All" by Metallica. I thought it was the worst piece of shit I ever heard.
Really?
I just did not understand it because there's so much aggression and so much like. Now when I hear that record, I'm like, how did I think that? How did I think Poison was better than Metallica?
Right.
Yeah. I remember this one time when we were kids. I played in this band in high school. I was like maybe 14, 15 years old. And my older brother, he loved Led Zeppelin. Like he just worshiped the ground they walked on. And I remember the drummer that was in my band at the time, we got in a fight with my brother that Ricky Rocket from Poison was a better drummer than John Bonham.
Nice.
And my brother was like, I'm going to fucking punch you in the face if you keep talking.
His head was probably about to explode.
I look back at that now and I'm like, what the fuck were we thinking?
All right, so I'm going to jump in here for a second. I don't necessarily agree with your point on that, but I have seen Poison back in the day, in their heyday.
Yeah.
And he was a pretty underrated drummer. He actually can play.
Oh, yeah, he's good, yeah. Poison is still one of the greatest live acts around.
Yeah.
Like, I saw them open for Def Leppard. It was Tesla, Poison, and Def Leppard. And when they played, that whole Coliseum was just like, it was a party.
Oh, yeah.
The guy still has as much energy as he did when he was 20.
And I think you hit it right on the head when he said it's a party. And that was my problem with the, I'm going to go for it, between the good glam hair metal stuff, and then when we switched to that grungy Seattle stuff, because it was a great big party. You hit it right on the head. Everybody was having fun, nothing but a good time, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you got Knucklehead with unwashed hair and down-tuned guitar singing about how bad his life is, and I don't want any part of that, man. I want to have fun.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it reflected. There's a lot of '90s music I love, like. I remember the first time I heard "Smells Like Teen Spirit," my mind was just blown away by how heavy it was,
right,
and how loud the recording was. Like, I remember putting that CD in my truck for the first time, and it just about blew my speakers out of the truck because it was mastered so loud. Now I look back at it, it's so quiet compared to what we have now, but I was just so blown away by it. And I think too that art mimics culture.
Yeah.
And at the time when grunge was coming around, there's a lot of political stuff going on. There's a lot of war stuff going on, and people were becoming a lot more kind of inward thinking, or more like politicized than they were in the 80s.
But all the more reason to want to release and nothing but a good time and tease your hair and throw on some Aquanet and, roll out.
Yeah, absolutely. Put a cucumber down your pants and let's roll.
Right.
Man, I saw, speaking of hair metal, randomly on my Facebook feed the other day, I saw Skid Row play I Remember You live at some big music festival. They were opening for Guns N' Roses.
Wow.
And man, could Sebastian Bach ever sing? Holy crap, dude. I mean, I saw them open for Aerosmith, and I thought they were good, but I was in like grade 8. So, I mean, did I know what was good? But when I saw that video, I was just like, holy man, how many octaves does this guy have?
He's crazy. You know what's funny? You mentioned them. I just was reading this morning out on Blabbermouth that he's going out on his tour, I don't know, in September or something, and he's playing the whole first record live.
Yeah, I know.
He sent an invite out to all the band members to just come on and join him. That would be great if we get a reunion, because I know there's been bad blood, but I'd love to see the original.
Yeah, I read an interview about that, and he reached out to every single one of them, and they didn't even respond.
Oh, really?
I wonder what happened there. Like, what did he do?
I don't know. That's a drag, because that's a band I would love to see back together. And
oh yeah, I mean, God, they were good. But you'd think like something pretty bad must have happened. Like, did he pull a Vince Neil and just screw everyone's wife?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because you're right. 30 years, bury the hatchet, and those shows would sell out, because I know, I'd have my tickets to numerous cities probably.
Oh, me too. Man, oh man, that first record was unbelievable. And I don't know how true this is, so hopefully one day we'll get to interview Michael Wagner. But apparently they recorded the drums in a warehouse, and that's what gave the drums those huge sound.
Wow.
And they did the gang vocals in there too. So like on Youth Gone Wild, where it just sounds so like huge, it was because they were tracked in a warehouse. Now I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what I've been, you go on the internet and you find all this shit.
Well, we'll have to get a hold of Michael Wagner. So
yeah, I would love to know. But that record had some unbelievable recordings.
Oh yeah, my God! And you know what? The next one I liked a lot too. And then I don't know after that. I mean, Slave to the Grind I think was good, and it was a lot heavier, but it was still really good.
Oh yeah, I love Slave to the Grind, but when I look back at like when it came out, I just loved how heavy it was. But when when I look back at it now, the first record was still probably songwriting wise, it was better. The second record seemed more like they were trying to be heavier.
Right.
And then the third record they did with Bob Rock at Greenhouse in Vancouver. And that just kind of seemed contrived. But I read an interview with Bob Rock about it, and apparently it was an impossible record to make because the band was they couldn't even be in the same room together.
Yeah, that sucks. But that first one as a debut, it's probably, besides Guns N' Roses, one of my favorite debuts.
It's got to be one of the bigger selling debut albums of all time, too. I think it sold 13 million copies or something.
Oh, really?
Let me look it up. Yeah, it sold a lot of, like, I know when I grew up in Canada, it was insane. Like, everybody had Skid Row records and t-shirts.
Oh, yeah. You know what, though? That when I listen to it, like, on Spotify or whatever, it's still timeless. I can listen to that record over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah. I'm just seeing how many records they sold here. It says they've sold 20 million records total. What was the first record called? It was just Skid Row.
It was just Skid Row, yeah. That had, like, Sweet Little Sister and When the Clock Strikes Midnight. And
Big Guns.
Big Guns, yeah. On top of the big hits, I'm sure they paid their mortgages off those ballads.
Oh, God. Yeah. Here I Am. That was such a good track.
Yes.
That was such a good track. 5 times platinum in the US, so 5 million.
Wow.
100,000 in the UK, 500,000 in Canada, and 70,000 in Australia. That's all they have listed.
Wow.
So that's like
the first one?
That's 6 million records, yeah.
Off just the first one, right?
Just off the first one. That's a pretty big That's a pretty big debut.
Oh yeah, but if you got your Googles up in front of you, what is Appetite for Destruction?
Oh God, that's let's not even talk about that. I mean, Wikipedia, let's just see. Come on down.
Double that?
Oh, I bet you it's over 30 million. Let's just see.
Really?
United States, 18 million. UK, 1.2 million.
You're going to be right.
Canada, 1 million. Argentina, 180,000. Australia, 490,000. Austria, 50,000. Brazil, 250,000. France, Germany, Japan, 200,000. Oh, Germany's 500,000. Oh, yeah, that's freaking crazy.
Yeah, so you're over 30. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not quick at math, but that's a lot of albums.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I find funny, though? It's like they had that record, and then I remember Use Your Illusion when they released Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. Record stores were lined up around the block.
I was one of the guys that was out like at midnight the night before, because a lot of record stores were doing it like midnight. We're going to release both of them, and I was one of those dudes that was out like 10 o'clock at night the night before waiting.
I have a story about this. My friend in high school worked at a record store. I lived in a small town. He worked at a record store called Top 40, and they got the Use Your Illusion records a week before they came out. So he just took them. And we listened to him before anyone had them.
Nice.
But nowadays, if we did that, we'd be sued because it would be on the internet.
Here's my thoughts on Use Your Illusion 2. If they would have combined it to one Use Your Illusion and taken the best off of both, it would have beat Appetite for Destruction.
Absolutely.
But I think they had too many fillers just to get the double album out.
Yeah, I don't know what the ideal was with wanting a double album. It seemed a little, I don't know, unnecessary. I think a double album, if you can fill it with, Appetite for Destruction, because there's not a bad song on Appetite. No, God, no. That record is from start to finish.
But I could probably take both Use Your Illusions and find 12 songs that rival or compare it to Appetite and having a great record.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It was probably like a freaking, what were they on, Elektra? Or they were on Geffen. It was probably like a Geffen thing to try and, just capitalize on all that money.
Yeah, I mean, it worked. I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, don't just buy one CD, buy two.
And everybody did. I mean, I got them both as well.
Because they called it a double album, but it wasn't sold as a double album.
No.
It was two separate CDs.
I don't know that anybody else, or that I'm aware of, anybody else has done that, like two releases on the same day, which are, like you said, not, bifold.
Yeah. It was strange. But, I mean, it worked. They made a lot of money. But what I find funny is they have these two albums. We could say three. Plus they have that acoustic record they did.
And I like that, actually, because that's where you got Patience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But they're selling out stadiums, off 3 or 4 albums that are over 20 years old.
Hey, you're listening to Brutally Delicious Podcast. I'm Bruce Moore.
And I'm Chris Seegers.
Hey, you don't sound hungover today. That's good.
Hey, I'm not. It's funny, right?
Which is good. We got to be on our money today. And today we've got a killer show for you. A little bit different. I'm really excited, though, to speak to Viren Swami, psychologist who wrote on this. Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, he's written a couple papers on heavy metal and its effect on the, sociology, psychology kind of thing?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Hey, hello. Viren.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. This is my partner, Chris.
How are you doing?
Good.
I want to understand what made you kind of write this paper, and not only what made you write it, but where can people read about it?
Well, they can email me for a copy.
Okay.
That's the easiest thing, and you can find my email online. It's not difficult. The why question is slightly tricky. So I'm interested in why people like different forms of art and different forms of music. And there is a lot of research to suggest, with music in particular, that people's personalities influence the type of music they might like. This is not true of everyone, and it's probably an overgeneralization, but you can, for example, you might say that people who are more open to different forms of aesthetic might be less likely to follow mainstream music, for example. They may be more open to different forms of, say, more challenging music or more complex music, which heavy metal fits that pattern.
Awesome. So another thing, when I was reading the paper, I noticed that you say, heavy metal tends to be more male dominated than female dominated, which, I mean, anyone that goes to a metal show can see that. But what drew how did you draw that conclusion?
So in the study, what we did was we didn't specifically look at heavy metal fans. We looked at the general population. So we looked at across a group of people who may or may not like heavy metal. If you present them with clips of, I think in this study we termed it a contemporary or new wave heavy metal. So bands like Disturbed. If you play them clips from these bands, do they like these songs? And what we found was that men tended to prefer the songs in general compared to the women.
Oh, that's where I got confused, because when you said the new wave of heavy metal in the paper, I was thinking of Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. And
So these were, I think, 2005 onwards. I think there were bands like As I Lay Dying, Disturbed, Overkill,
Right.
Stained, I think was one of them, Cradle of Filth.
okay, awesome.
Are you a metalhead yourself?
Yeah.
You are? Old school metalhead or newer kind of to the fold?
New school.
New school. So that's kind of Chris. Chris has got a story. He just started listening to it around 2011. So I don't know where he fits into this study because I've grown up since I was, I remember buying Diary of a Madman from Ozzy back in whatever that was, 1982.
The thing is, I think with the results of our study, I think they're probably applicable to most people. So I think even if you liked old school metal, if you like heavy metal, I think our main findings that people who are more open to experience, so openness to experience is basically a personality trait. Everyone is open to experience to some degree. Some people are high in openness to experience, some people are low. Our study, and this is consistent with other studies as well, suggests that people who are more open to different forms of aesthetic, particularly challenging and complex forms of music, are more likely to like heavy metal, all forms of heavy metal.
Gotcha.
Nice.
I was actually quite excited too to read that I'm not considered a deviant or violent because growing up as a kid, man, I grew up in a religious kind of environment, and man, they used to play records backwards and you're the devil and you're, just because we like the heavier stuff. And then I found your paper and I'm like, wow, there's redemption. I'm not the evil psycho killer.
I think the reason for that is fairly simple to understand. I think it's easy to demonize heavy metal, mainly possibly because a lot of the imagery is challenging for mainstream popular culture. If you for example, if there's this, back in the day, there was this idea, and it's probably a very crude stereotype of the heavy metal fan, that they're aggressive, that they're anti-establishment, that they are they're more likely to take drugs and take extreme drugs and so on. None of this seems to be backed up by any research. If you look at the evidence, heavy metal fans are just as aggressive as, say, pop fans. If you look at the evidence, heavy metal fans are just as aggressive as punk fans or whatever other fans you want to look at. There are no stereotypical differences. Now, that's not to say that all genres of heavy metal are the same. For example, if you listen to death metal, you're probably slightly more, on average, aggressive than someone else. But it's better, I think, to understand, not to kind of rely on these crude stereotypes, but to understand why someone who might be more aggressive might like heavy metal. That's more informative. It's better to understand the reasons why than to kind of stereotype heavy metal fans. But I think the other reason why people like stereotype heavy metal fans is because it provides them with an easy scapegoat. It's easy to say that these individuals are somehow deviant or somehow not suitable for our society because they're different. And the extreme example of this would be a hate crime where someone who might dress like a goth, for example, is murdered, which happened in this country not so long ago because they look different.
Right.
Well, I remember in the United States when Columbine happened, they blamed Marilyn Manson for it. Yeah. Which was just, I didn't understand that.
It reflects a refusal to look at the underlying causes of, say, gun violence and crime in the US, rather than actually instead making a very simplistic judgment that someone who likes heavy metal is somehow more aggressive or deviant.
My experience has actually been the opposite, because since I'm new to metal and I've just started going to metal shows, I've never met a bunch of more kind people than what I'm going. That's really what made me start going to the shows. Like after I went to my first festival, I was like, I feel like I'm part of a family already. And everyone's so nice. And they're like buying you beers, you're buying them beers. Even if you get in the pit and you fall down, 10 people will be there to lift you up. And if you're hurt, they'll get you out of there. There's no, it's so peaceful, even though the music is so aggressive.
This is the other thing that we found in our study. So old research suggested that people, or that at least heavy metal fans, might inhabit what's sometimes called a culture or subculture of alienation. They feel left out of mainstream society. They feel left behind. They feel like they haven't got a voice in mainstream society. And one of the nice things that heavy metal might do is it provides a community. It's not just the music. It's the community of people who come together and enjoy something together and have a shared experience of something and actually help out each other, sharing music or sharing new bands that they might have heard of and talking about things. And that shared perspective can be really, really important for someone who might, for example, have really low self-esteem. It helps to build up people. It helps to provide a sense of community in a way that I believe mainstream popular contemporary music doesn't.
I think you hit it right on the head because, I mean, Chris and I will tell you, we've been to so many like festivals or whatever. And I mean, you meet people from around the world, share the love of a riff or some guy screaming. And right away, they're like, hey, when you come to this festival in my country, I don't know you from Adam, but you can stay with me. Or, hey, it's amazing.
Well, and this is maybe a bit of a dark story, but I'll share it because it's actually how I got into metal. So in 2011, my friends were putting on a metal festival. But the year before, I'd gone through a divorce. And at the beginning of 2011, well, it wasn't really a divorce, just the end of a long-term relationship, which was hard. We had to sell condos and do all that stuff. And then at the beginning of 2011, I'd gone through a pretty traumatic experience. And it really messed me up mentally. I was like, ugh. But my friends were putting on this festival, and they said, oh, you got to go on this boat with us. So I said, oh, sure, whatever. I mean, what do I care? It'll be something fun to do. And I went, and it almost cured me of all of that last year and a bit of stuff that I went through because of that cultural experience that happened. You know, I went by myself, and by the end of it, I knew everybody, even the bands.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I think there's a definite catharsis. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, that was one of the oldest theories about heavy metal and why people listen to heavy metal is because of that cathartic appeal. If you, for example, not to say that every heavy metal experiences this, but if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling sad, and this is true probably of a lot of different musical genres, but particularly with heavy metal, it allows you to express that. If I'm feeling angry at any point, I put on some nice music, and it allows me just to go through and sit with that music and go, well, I understand what I'm feeling now. I'm feeling angry about something. I can work through what I'm feeling. Not to say that happens for everyone, not to say that's true of every heavy metal band or every heavy metal fan, but it allows that cathartic release of, in some cases, anger. In other cases, it might be sadness. In other cases, it might just be, I'm feeling like I want to be with other people who understand me.
It's the exact opposite of the public opinion, though, right? Because they think I'm playing the new Slayer record and I want to go out and stab people or slice somebody's throat, exactly. Which is so far from the truth.
I think part of the problem here is that I think in Europe at least there is Burism and the kind of the Norwegian death metal bands are essentially in the news a lot again at the moment. I think a lot of people confuse the band with the fans. The band members may have done some really horrific stuff. That doesn't mean that all their fans are doing exactly the same thing. And again, that's not to say that their fans, some individual fans of heavy metal may not have done bad things, but in the same way you wouldn't say that every pop fan in the world is completely innocent of anything they've ever done.
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've never been to a heavy metal festival where something terrible has happened. I'm sure it has. At Wacken, I'm sure you put 100 and what do they have, 150,000 there? Something's going to happen with that amount of people that confined together, but it's not specific to heavy metal.
Yeah,
exactly. It's just specific to that asshole, really.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, in the same way, I think that's without kind of pushing the boat too far out. I think that's true of any musical genre. I think to blame the music is ridiculous. The music is the expression of something. It's not the underlying cause of violence. It's not the underlying cause of something bad happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I also found it interesting in the paper when I was reading yesterday that in your study, you found that most people are like anti-pop or anti-mainstream, and I had no idea why, but that's been me from the beginning. I think anything that starts with pop culture or the word pop, I'm so turned off, I don't even give it a chance. But that's like ingrained in me for some reason.
So I mean, if I had to profile your personality, I'd probably define you as probably anti-culture. So anti-culture simply means you have not so much problems, but you don't find satisfaction in mainstream culture, whether that's music or art or whatever. And that means you gravitate towards other forms of aesthetic, other forms of music, other forms of art that may be more interesting to you. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how people behave. Human psychology is so complex that sometimes we just like things that are a bit different. But the nice thing about heavy metal, or maybe not so much nice, but the unique thing about heavy metal is that I think it combines both the sense of anti-culture with a sense of anti-authority. A lot of heavy metal relates to being anti-authoritarian in the sense that we don't generally like being told what to do. We like transgressive forms of culture. We like transgressive forms of music. And one of the nice things about heavy metal is that it's such a broad church. There are so many different types of heavy metal, so many different genres of heavy metal. But a lot of the thread underlying a lot of that is the sense that we are anti-something. We have a unifying sense of identity. It provides us with, if I met, for example, one of you and in person, we had a conversation about what we like and dislike, I can probably make a safe assumption that there will be things in common that we like because of the music, beyond music, I mean.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's great.
Thank you for the profiling too. That was great.
Yeah, I feel stripped down and naked.
the thing to bear in mind, though, I think one of the things with personality profiling, and particularly in terms of music, is that the personality profiles don't tell us very much. Essentially, what they're saying is that heavy metal fans are just like everyone else. They may be slightly more open to experience. They may be slightly more anti-authoritarian, but generally, we're just like everyone else. You can't use a personality profile to say that these individuals who like heavy metal, whatever form of heavy metal, are deviant or antisocial in any way.
I think it's great that you said the whole openness thing because, I mean, the godfather of the metal is openly gay, and there's fans from all over the world. It doesn't matter race, creed, religion. You've got bands like Stryper, and I run into religious people all the time who still like it. And I can still sit and listen to them, to have a conversation with them at a bar because we bond over the riff and maybe the anti thing. I'm not sure, but it's amazing. You're right. It's very open, I think.
Well, let me tell you this story. In my neighborhood, we have, I forget what the church is called. Is it the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or the Mormons that go door to door and anyways, one of them, I'm not sure who it is. And if I'm offending anyone, I'm sorry. I just don't know. But anyways, I was wearing a Gojira shirt. Sorry, Bruce. And I'm walking down, Bruce doesn't like Gojira. So I'm walking down the street and I see these guys with the Bibles in their hands and their backpacks full of Bibles. And I'm like, oh God, they're going to try and sell me religion. And people can believe whatever they want. I have no problem with what people believe. I just don't want any part of it. And I'm like, oh God, they're going to hit me up. And this kid goes, Gojira. And I was just like, yeah. I was like, it's a metal band. He's like, I know. They're my favorite band. And I was just like, cool, man. He's like, metal. And then he just walked away. I was like, wow, that just happened. And that was a shared experience with someone that I was already closed off to. That somehow it opened it up. It was really quite a cool experience.
I mean, every rock fan will have a similar experience. When I was, I think I'm probably about 15, I was traveling through an airport. I was wearing a Sepultura top. And I remember this random person came up and talked to me. I couldn't understand what he was saying, but I understood eventually that he was trying to tell me he liked Sepultura. And that's all it was. He just came up to me to have a conversation about Sepultura. And that's what's nice about. I mean, again, it overturns this idea that heavy metal fans are somehow antisocial, that we don't want to talk to other people. We love chatting about music. We love meeting other people.
Man, I could have conversations in the grocery store looking at eggs and find somebody wearing a Sepultura shirt or a Slayer shirt and be like, fucking Slayer. And then all of a sudden we're having this conversation.
Oh yeah. That's the first person I met when I moved to Virginia was a guy who worked for the U.S. government for U.S. Border Patrol. And he was living in our company housing where we were moved to at first. And he was wearing Sepultura pants. So I was like, oh, let's talk. And then now he moved back to Alaska, but we're still in touch all the time.
In the same way that you wouldn't be able to do if you just simply liked mainstream culture, I think, or mainstream music at least. You wouldn't go up to someone and just say, hello, I like your music because you listen to mainstream music. It doesn't really work that way. Because I think heavy metal fans are a community of people who understand each other and understand that they're not mainstream, they're not in the mainstream eye, there is a much closer sense of affinity. We like each other almost just because we like the same music.
Yeah, like if somebody was wearing a Taylor Swift shirt, I'm not going to walk up to her and be like, if I'm a Taylor Swift fan, like, oh my God, exactly. You like Taylor Swift too? Like,
oh, you might do, but you might have a 1-minute conversation about that and move on to other things. Whereas with heavy metal, you can have a long conversation about your favorite bands, where they are, what they're doing now. and that one album you heard in 1993 that completely changed your life.
All while getting a dozen eggs in the grocery store. I mean, my wife was like, "Come on, we gotta go," and I'm like, "No, wait a second. He knows about Overkill's riff back in Feel the Fire. No, we gotta go, really."
Have you profiled the opposite? So, like, for instance, you looked at why people like heavy metal. Have you looked at why certain groups target heavy metal?
When you say target, you mean...
So, like, let's say, like, religious groups will be like, we have to ban this, or we can't let our kids listen to this, we can't do this, we can't do that. What is the opposite of a metalhead? Why are people so scared of it? Have you looked into that?
That's a more difficult question to answer, and from a psychological point of view, it's really difficult to answer. But from a political point of view, it's more straightforward. I think some people need scapegoats. They don't want to address the underlying causes of problems in society. If, for example, your issue is that there is too much violence in society, it's much easier to blame an outgroup. And by outgroup, I simply mean a group that doesn't belong to the mainstream society, mainstream culture. So it's much easier to blame the outgroup. What that does, it does two things. It identifies a target. It says, here's the people, or here are the people you should be blaming for what's going on. But it also gives your in-group a sense of, well, I'm different to them, and anything that happens to my in-group now is better, and I want to make my in-group feel different or feel better about itself. And by targeting the out-group, you make your in-group feel better. So essentially by saying heavy metal fans are the cause of all the ills in the world, all the violence that's happening, you make your in-group feel better about it. And also you allow expression, so you allow your group to target the out-group now. They can do something about it. And that sense of agency is really important. It's the same thing that happens with anytime any in-group targets an out-group, whether it's an ethnic minority or an immigrant or someone of a different race or different sex. It's the same pattern of behavior. But for heavy metal fans, I think one of the difficult things that heavy metal fans will experience is that we are visible. We wear our heavy metal in the way we dress, in the way what we wear, the bands we listen to, the kind of clothes or the places we go to. It makes us stand out. And anytime you have an opportunity to identify and vilify someone who stands out, it makes life so much easier. But the important kind of the converse to that is our research shows that if you go beyond the appearance, if you go beyond just how people dress or what bands they listen to or the music they listen to, heavy metal fans are psychologically almost identical to everyone else.
That's awesome.
Interesting, because I grew up, like I was saying earlier, where, I mean, you used to have the burning the records and spinning things backwards. And, just because I had my Slayer t-shirt on, I was going to burn in hell. And it's so different, and things have changed for sure.
I remember I went to a Catholic school as a kid, and I remember feeling targeted specifically because I was wearing, what was I wearing? I was wearing a Motley Crue t-shirt, which Bruce and I have a disagreement. Like, I don't really consider that metal. He's like, well, it was metal of the 80s. But anyways, I was wearing a Motley Crue t-shirt, and the priest gave this like big sermon about how evil Motley Crue was. For like 30 minutes, he went on about heavy metal and Motley Crue, and I'm sitting there in this group of people just feeling singled out, and it pushed me really quite far away from anything to do with religion at all. Honestly, I was like, you don't like Motley Crue? Get out of here.
Well, that's the other thing that we found in our study. So people who were more religious tended to dislike the heavy metal. And there are other studies also suggesting that religiousness, not necessarily a religion, if you are more religious, you're less likely to like heavy metal. Again, it needs to be qualified. Like, for example, you'll know this, that there are lots of different heavy metal bands that come through Christianity and other religious groups as well. And
cool.
they express their religiousness through their music.
Bruce did a film about it.
Yeah, exactly. But as a group of people, if you want to generalize, you might say that heavy metal fans tend to be less religious than other music fans. Again, that reflects their antiness, the rebelliousness of heavy metal fans. They're rebelling against anything that's mainstream, and religion is mainstream.
I also think, though, that you said that, going back to the openness, I've seen bands like For Today who are super duper religious or whatever, but they're playing big festivals and not a damn person in the audience cares. They're still just moshing and have a good time. It doesn't matter that they're pushing Jesus or they're pushing Allah or they're whatever. They're just
it's just an expression.
Listening to the riff and banging their heads. And I think that whole openness is what you were saying earlier.
I
That's great.
It's probably the early 2000s when POD first came out. I remember listening to them on repeat, and it wasn't until years later that I realized they were a Christian band, and they were very heavily they liked the Christian values, but it didn't matter to me. I still listen to them now.
Yeah, I would say once you found out, you didn't turn them off. It's just they're still good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I was going to say one thing, which is the kind of, I know we've been talking a lot of the positive stuff. The more difficult stuff to talk about is obviously a lot of, we kind of touched on this, what happens when a heavy metal fan is singled out. And that is sometimes really difficult, because I think the kind of the extension of what we've been talking about is that mainstream society does demonize heavy metal fans, and sometimes that demonization can result in really horrific endings, whether it's murder or a physical attack on someone who likes heavy metal. And I think one of the really important things is that I think we shouldn't minimize what happens. We shouldn't minimize the victimization that happens, and we shouldn't, but also conversely, we shouldn't act as victims. We're not victims. We're allowed to like whatever music we like. We're allowed to behave, wear our favorite band's t-shirt. We're allowed to go to concerts in the same way that anyone else is. And I think one of the things that maybe heavy metal fans haven't often done is to consider the politics of heavy metal, which is that we are part of a community, and often we have a responsibility to look out for each other. Sometimes I think we stand back from not doing that because we don't want to get involved or we don't understand each other. But I think if you take this sense of community to its extreme, we have a responsibility to look out for each other, not just at concerts, not just at venues, but even outside. When we see horrible things happening to people who are heavy metal fans, we should be sticking up for each other.
Unbelievable. Awesome.
This is by far one of my favorite interviews. I thank you so much for taking
me
the
too.
time.
I'm just like in awe right now. I just want to keep listening, but I don't want to take up your whole day.
Well, thank you for having me.
Unbelievable.
Dude, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Not worthy.
Not worthy. Man, that was one of the best ones I've done. Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's awesome argument. Is Gojira good, or do you like Gojira?
I don't mind them.
Thank you. Keep in mind that I'm going to edit, so this is going to depend on how great this podcast comes out.
Okay, so here's a question for both of you then. Have either of you ever seen them live?
I have not.
No.
Okay, then you have no judgment. It'll change you.
That is a fair argument.
It will change you live. Like, my God, it's when I first saw them, it was like seeing Metallica. Somebody described it to me like this: it's like seeing Metallica on the Kill 'Em All tour, where they were just tearing up the country.
So Viren, let me just tell you, I don't dislike them. I just don't know what the massive put them on a pedestal kind of thing is. They're way better.
Like that, so many bands that we put on pedestals, and I don't really understand why we do it. But Gojira seems one of the more minor ones that we do that to.
Thank you.
If they come up for some reason, I'll listen. I'm not going to turn them off.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go out of my way to buy an album.
Okay,
Viren and I are on the same page here.
If you get a chance to see them live, I think you'll change your minds.
That is true, but then you can say that of a lot of bands. There are a lot of bands I'd rather go see live before I go see Gojira.
I'm like
Thank you, Viren. Yeah. The editing of this podcast is going to come out heavily good in your favor, I promise. Well, that's all I've got, man.
Me too.
I thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank
we'll be in touch.
All right.
Be well, brother.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Holy bejesus.
That was awesome.
That definitely is one of my favorite ones so far.
Oh, yeah, that was killer.
Wow.
What a nice guy.
Super nice guy. And
he's like, he's a metalhead. He's like, I'm a professor of psychology at this university. I'm like, what? You look like you're 20.
Right. And I got a profile out of the whole thing, so.
Yeah, now you can feel better about how fucked up you are.
I'm anti-cultural or something. He said, I got to go back and listen to what he said because he may have hit me right on the head. Wow, that was pretty. I'm still trying to absorb everything he just said. I'm going to have to listen to this a couple times because.
Yeah, no, this is by far one of my favorite interviews we've ever done.
I hope everybody who's listening to this goes out and sends him an email and gets a copy of that paper because this is some great stuff. Share this.
Absolutely.
Blow up his Facebook. I think everybody listening to this and even your friends should be reading it and checking it out because
It's
we're
pretty
not a
short
bunch of
paper too. It's like 5,000 words, 6,000 words.
Yeah, but in the end, we're not a bunch of deviant assholes who are looking to go murder people.
No, we're just anti-culture.
Which I knew already, but I think the rest of the world needs to know that because I have no, hateful bone in my body. I'm just a dude.
Yeah, I just like heavy music.
Who likes listening to Slayer, right? So whatever. That was freaking fantastic.
I might be wearing an upside down cross on me, but if you're broken down on the side of the road, I'm going to help you change your tire.
So listen, at the end, you're 100% right. At the end of the day, that is, I told you I grew up religious, have my beliefs, do whatever, and that is sort of the opposite of the way I grew up. And I know a guy named Jeremiah Stratton. He's in Head PE. He's the drummer.
Yeah.
He is the president of the Association of the Wicked, some big satanic group out of Michigan or whatever.
Yeah.
Dude, he is they're always running fundraisers for children's hospitals and cancers and all this stuff. And he is the nicest guy in the world. And at the end of the day, if my mom or somebody comes in and be like, oh crap, he's got an upside down cross on his head, on his, wears a chain or whatever. And they immediately judge him. But I got to tell you, Jeremiah is one of the nicest guys in the world.
Oh yeah. I don't judge people based on their religion.
No, me neither. But it's hard because so many people do.
Oh, absolutely. They do. Yeah. I mean, I left religion because it just wasn't for me personally. I found it wasn't my thing, but I don't care if anyone likes it. I mean, that's their right. I mean, we live in a free world, man. Well, some people do.
And at the end of the day, I mean, I think if you're a good person, you're a good person, whether you're believing in Jesus, Allah, whatever, Satan, whatever it goes on to be, you're a good guy. And that doesn't even have to come up in conversation. We can have a beer and talk about, or not talk about Gojira, whatever you want to do. See what I did there?
Yeah, I got you. Little side swipe. Right. Yeah, no, that was great. He was really good.